Right. Okay, good morning. Thank you, Alan. As Alan said, my name is Paul Shillcock, and this morning I've been asked to give you an introduction really to PAS 1192 Part 2, which I understand is going to be one of a series of events over the series. So really in the next 30 minutes or so, I just really want to give you a good ground or a background in terms of the document itself. I'm just going to start with a quick bit of background about myself. As Alan says, I'm a freelance consultant and co-founder of Avanti Partnership, which is a research and education provider in the UK, and the hat that I'll be wearing this morning. And really we develop and deliver practical level education on the information management roles associated with information management as defined within the PAS. And we deliver that in a collaboration agreement with the Building Research Establishment in the UK. Yes, I'm also the co-author of PAS 1192 Part 2, which is probably one of the reasons why I was asked along today. And more recently, I'm producing a series of standards, a series of international standards really, that will enable international organisations to work on projects all over the world. The series will be based on BS 1192 and PAS 1192 Part 2. Not too much to worry about just at the moment. They're due to be published next year. And I'm also on the committee member on the Construction Project Information Committee, which was set up in 1987. It's formed by a number of the major professional bodies in the UK to develop and disseminate best practice in the production of information, probably most notably for Uniclass, which is the classification system in the UK, and also some of the templates that were produced in support of the PAS. And as Anna mentioned, founding chair of BIM for Infrastructure UK, which started off as BIM for Rail. So we were one of the first BIM 4 groups. There seems to be a proliferation of BIM 4 groups at the moment. And speaking with other sort of infrastructure sort of clients, we expanded it beyond rail to include obviously other types of asset owners. Okay, so that's probably more than enough about me. So this morning then really just want to give you a bit of background in terms of a brief history. I wasn't entirely sure what the level of awareness was in the what the level of awareness was in the room. So I won't spend too much time. I'll just give you a bit of background as to where we've come today. Look at the key elements within the document, and it's adopted both in the UK and beyond, which is quite a popular question at the moment. And then finally, just to finish off really, some considerations for those of you who are either about to or are currently trying to adopt the document within your organisation. Okay, so a brief history. I put this guy up because this is normally the face that everyone pulls, but I'm hoping, given where we are, there's probably it's going to be relevant for a lot of people. So I'm only going to go back to 1994. I'm not going to give you the whole history, but certainly the problems within our industry that PAS 1192 Part 2 is trying to solve have been known for a long time. There are a number of reports and research that's been done. I've just put up some of the key documents, which is research jointly done by the UK government and industry. Start off in 94 with the Latham report. A lot of the titles of these documents are very relevant in the terms of some Michael Latham with constructing the team. Basically the message he was trying to give out was that really you need to start looking at building the team first before you actually start building the asset for real. Moving on to John Egan, rethinking construction. The message there was really that this isn't just a sort of change in the way in which we do things. This is actually calling for a complete rethink in the way in which we actually go about our business now within our industry. Frustrated at the lack of progress, so John Egan then did another report called Accelerating Change, Again, the UK government keen to, or a little bit frustrated in the industry sort of adoption of the recommendations. We're trying to look at ways in terms to incentivise. Moving on to Never Waste a Good Crisis by Andrew Walthamstow, now at Crossrail, who believe that the change in terms of the economic climate, the advance of technology, and the sort of digital age all create what we refer to as this perfect storm. And then finally, the infrastructure cost review, which was done in 2010, which was quite a damning report really in terms of the UK, which reported that in certain areas we were up to 40% more expensive to deliver the same assets than our European counterparts. So any of you suffering from a little bit of insomnia, they're all quite a good read, and they're all sort of freely available. But really, the journey for me at least started with this guy, Paul Morrell, who some of you may be aware of. He was the inaugural Chief Construction Advisor in 2009. And one of the first messages he came out with is that he was adamant that there wouldn't be another report on the construction industry's inability to collaborate and eliminate waste. He was a QS with Davis Langdon, and as being a QS knew where every penny was spent and therefore where every penny was sort of wasted in terms of delivery. So what Paul did was he got a working group together, chaired by Mark Bew. I was fortunate to be part of that working group, really to answer the question, if the UK government actually mandated the use of a collaborative way of working, what would the impact be on the supply chain? So in terms of the group, he set up a number of work streams and objectives for the group to go away and answer. In response, Mark Bew, who 3 years before, along with Mervyn Richards, developed what was become fondly known as the Bim wedge, and sort of synonymous with the sort of Bim journey within the UK. It was a suggestion that if we aim for level 2, then with the way in which the contractual and the technical ability of the supply chain, it would be reasonable for the UK supply chain to adopt BIM level 2 by 2016. But it was a journey really in terms of the transformation, moving from level 0, where the majority of the industry was, up to level 2 by 2016, and then we can move forward and push on from there. And that's exactly what Paul did. So in the construction strategy, which was published in 2011, one of the strategic objectives within there was around BIM level 2. So for all of you who have heard about the BIM mandate, there isn't actually a BIM strategy in the UK. It's a construction strategy, of which there are 12 strategic objectives, one of which was BIM, and this is it, a simple sentence saying that the government will require fully collaborative BIM level 2, with all project and asset information, documentation and data being electronic. And that was it. Okay. In terms of the carrot and the stick, in terms of the strategy was the stick. In terms of the carrot, the government promised that they would go out and support industry to develop the capability, but also to promote that capability within the UK, so that UK construction companies or the construction industry can go out and export their services internationally. They even appointed a BIM czar, as it was called, so Richard Saxon, who had the unenviable job of going around the world promoting the UK construction industry. And it wasn't long before the UK actually realised that this does actually have an impact on their growth agenda as a whole, as an economy, that if we were able to become leaders in this area, then that would enable UK companies to export and therefore increase our GDP. And then more recently, the Construction 25 strategy, which set some quite, I would say optimistic, but some targets around cost, delivery, emissions and exports. But the question still remained, how exactly was the UK industry going to actually be able to achieve this? Okay, so we had BS 1192, which was published in 2007. So this predates the construction strategy and predates BIM. There's a whole history behind the document, but the processes and procedures for the production of information have all been proven and were documented as a code of practice in 2007. But what the task group realised was that there was a need really to develop a set of processes and procedures around the management of that information to support BS 1192. So along with Maeve and Richards, we were commissioned by the task group to develop what we now know as PAS 1192 Part 2, which looks at the management of information through the delivery phase of assets when using building information modelling. To complete the life cycle, they also commissioned another publicly available specification, which is Part 3 in the series, looking at the operational phase of that asset. Working out how to get data between the two, the delivery phase and the operational phase. We also published, or the BSI published, BS 1192 Part 4, which looks at the exchange of information on the COBE standard, which some of you may be familiar with. And then currently, we're also developing PAS 1192 Part 5 to complete the series. Government as a client, and in terms of critical infrastructure, in a digital age, security has become a key factor in the production of information and distribution of that information. So we're currently developing a public available specification around security of information when using building information modelling. So essentially what you've got is the 1192 series, and again this is what is being now being used as the basis for ISO 19650. There was also a need identified to develop some other documents. So we've got the CIC BIM protocol, which looks at the gaps really in the current forms of contract within the UK to adopt collaborative working. Soft landings, which actually started off like as a separate initiative, but looked at the progressive delivery of information throughout the delivery of the assets to the asset owner. And that is now being moved from a policy into a British standard or an update to BS 8526. There's also a need to look at in terms of the classification of information and also a need for a plan of work specifically designed around the production of digital information. These last two are being grouped together and are known as the Bim Toolkit. They went out on a tender which RIBA Enterprises, or otherwise known as MBS in the UK, are currently developing, and we hope to get the sort of first visibility of that in March, which is very close, so maybe March, April, shall we say. So collectively what you've got is a series of documents, either an online toolkit, which collectively represent what we would define as BIM level 2. Okay, so if you're looking to adopt or implement or achieve, or however you want to say it, BIM level 2, then these are the documents really that you need to be looking at in terms of defining that. And where PAS 1192 fits in is it actually provides a framework document for all that, so that golden thread throughout them all, and really is your starting point on your sort of journey, if you haven't started that already, towards BIM level 2. Okay, so history lesson over. What we'll do is just have a look at these sort of key elements within it. So PAS 1192 Part 2, the title of which is Specification for Information Management for the Capital Delivery Phase of Construction Projects using Building Information Modelling. It's a bit of a mouthful, but you'd be amazed how many hours was discussed or debated on the actual title itself. The key thing really is information management. Okay, we didn't have, in the first versions of it, we didn't have the word BIM in it at all, and we were trying to emphasise this point around that it's the the management of that information. However, the task group were a little bit nervy of banging the whole BIM drum and then publishing a document which didn't contain the word BIM. So we added building information modelling on the end. So just to point out, it is a publicly available specification, as Alan rightly says. This means anybody with enough money can commission the BSI to produce a document or publish a document that can then be available, obviously, to anybody who wants to use it or wishes to adopt it. In this case, the UK government as a client. So it's therefore not a British standard. Okay, so a long time in terms of contracts, most contracts will have a clause in there, all relevant British standards to be applied. The PAS, or as a PAS, doesn't fall into that category. It builds upon BS 1192 2007. Okay, it does not replace it. Again, this is another misconception. BS 1192 isn't always promoted on the basis that it's not free. So the UK government are keen to sort of promote that all these documents are free, with the exception of BS 1192. But you do need to be able to follow the process procedures within BS 1192 in order to undertake the processes. It is the framework document for BIM Level 2, as I've mentioned, so there is a definition in there. However, since it was published, that definition has expanded to incorporate the documents I've just mentioned. It's not a BIM standard, okay, so it's not going to actually tell you how to drive your tool, whatever that might be in terms of how to produce that information. It will tell you how to manage that information and make sure that it's accurate and it's coordinated and there's provenance behind it, but it won't tell you actually how to which buttons to press. It's applicable to all sizes of projects. There is another misconception that it is only for the big major projects, and it's not really relevant to the smaller projects. The principles within it are equally applicable to small projects, refurbs, as they are to the big ones. It's applicable to all types of procurement, so it's agnostic to any particular form of contract. It's agnostic to any particular procurement route that you might take. It was a bit challenging, really, to try and develop a standard in that way. But really, the idea is to take the framework and the activities within it and apply that to whichever procurement method that you're currently engaged within. It's also applicable to all types of asset, coming from the sort of infrastructure side of the world. We started off that BIM was just for buildings, and we spent a lot of time trying to convince everybody that it was equally applicable for linear assets as well. To the point now where there's accusations really that this is all about infrastructure and it's not relevant for buildings. So we seem to have come sort of full circle. And it's technology agnostic, okay? So there's no, although it's enabled, the processes are enabled by technology, they're not you specify any particular technology. If you've read the document, you'll realise it's structured around what's known as the information delivery cycle, which really brings the whole picture together. In the middle, we've got the common data environment, which is essentially BS 1192, 2007, which is the progressive development of information to produce the information model, which is made up of a graphical model, non-graphical data, and documentation. Okay, there are three elements to that, and the progressive delivery of that information through the delivery phase. The blue represents the management process, which is actually the core of PAS 1192 through the delivery phase, and at the end we've got the management of information through the operational, which is covered in PAS 1192 part 3, therefore completing the life cycle of the asset. However, the management process within it are, if you were to stretch them out in terms of a linear, we start off with assessment and need. This activity really is around defining the requirements for information as the employer, understanding what the key decision points are, the decisions that need to be made at that point, and the questions that need to be answered in order to make those decisions, therefore forming the requirements for information. In terms of the procurement activity, it's predominantly around the supplier, developing a proposed approach to responding to the employer's information requirements and assessing their delivery team's capability and capacity to do so. This is normally incorporated within what's become known as the BIM execution plan. Upon selection and post-contract award, you then start to get into more detailed planning with the production of the task information delivery plans and the master information delivery plan. So everybody knows what information they need to produce, when they need to produce it, and all those dependencies between those are identified. Moving on to mobilization, where you have to start bringing the delivery team together, either through co-location, recruitment, procurement of technology, software, training, education, so that everybody knows how they're going to be working collaboratively together. And then we finally move into production, which is where the relationship of BS 1192 comes into play. So it's the processes and procedures within BS 1192 that you undertake during the production activity. And the processes within BS 1192 are expanded and elaborated slightly within PAS 1192. And then the final activity is the production and handover of the asset information model to the asset owner. Now, the key point, which is often not interpreted correctly in the document, is that these activities are undertaken for each and every contract on the project. They are not a one-time sort of pass per project. For every contract that is let across all tiers, okay, you need to follow the activities in that sequence. And if we look at the phases, so the typical phases where those activities are undertaken, we've got pre-tender, pre-contract, post-contract, pre-production, production, and then handover. And so if you look at the first four, all these activities are undertaken before the pen is put to paper, quite literally. So in a way, PAS 1192 Part 2 is actually about a procurement document. It's more of a procurement document than it is actually a production document. Okay, and a lot of the activities are done before the delivery team make a start. So, who's responsible for implementing this? Okay. Is it the what we've known to be or become known as the BIM manager? And I hold my hand up. I have had this or held this title at one point in the future. But if you look at those activities and the competencies that an individual would need to undertake all those activities, you are really looking for some sort of superhuman, of which I'm not. So within PAS 1192 Part 2, there are a number of information management roles. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail. However, I will point out that these are slightly modified from the original document in terms of from the learning to be able to communicate these. But essentially on the client side, we have the employee's representative. At the project level, we have the project delivery manager and project information manager. Typically at the tier 1, the design lead and the construction lead, which can be combined if it is a design and build. And then for every task team in the delivery team, we have a number of roles associated within that task team. Okay, and there are responsibilities assigned to each of these roles. They are not job titles, they are not individuals. An individual can undertake one or more roles, and a role can be undertaken by one or more people. Okay, which gives it that scalability. So looking at in terms of adoption in the UK and beyond, okay, it's very difficult really to try and give you an indication of that, but I'll do my best. So as we know, PAS 1192 is available as a free download from the BSI website. I checked with the BSI last week, and as of this month, there have been 14,500 downloads. Okay, that's not including the versions that are constantly emailed and pinged across. To answer the question in terms of adoption, it's very difficult. There are a number of research being undertaken. The McGraw-Hill Smart Market reports are pretty common. They've been doing them for a number of years. The problem is you start to get sort of charts like this, which tell you that, for example, in the USA, 75% of people in the US have been doing 3 years or more. It does help when you have a government minister who puts a mandate in terms of the application of it to incentivise adoption. And this is a graph from Phil Bernstein, who's a senior exec in Autodesk, who, in terms of Europe, put the UK somewhere behind Finland, but by the time 2016 comes, we should be there. I'm not entirely sure what the size of Phil's balls represents, but we're somewhere near the top. In terms of the MBS, I've been doing reports now for a number of years. Again, this whole concept or term around BIM, you end up getting silly comments like this. We've achieved BIM level 2 on most of our projects, but aim for BIM level 3 next year. So given what I've just said, that BIM level 2 is yet to be finalised and BIM level 3 hasn't even been defined, it's very difficult to understand where those statements come from. However, we do show that 51% are already at level 2 in the UK, and we've got 7% at level 3, which is quite amazing. But last year, with the first year, MBS actually started asking some sensible questions around which standards do you use, and we've got PAS 1192 Part 2 as 27%, so a quarter of the industry. In contrast, HS2 went out and did a survey of their supply chain, asking similar questions. So we've got which standards do you use? This time, and these are done at exactly the same time, we've got 57% of HS2 supply chain using BIM, PAS 1192 Part 2. To give you an idea, we've got Part 3, 23.4%, okay, which is quite strange because it had only been published a couple of weeks when the survey was actually done. So in terms of looking at the adoption, we've got lies, damn lies, and statistics. So it's very difficult really to give you an indication of that. I was going to do a very quick survey around in terms of the room. How long have we got, Alan? Have we done?
We've got a few minutes, yeah.
Okay. So very quickly, okay, it is a bit early. What I'd like you to do, if you'd all humour me for a minute, if you'd all just stand up very quickly. Okay? If the answer to the question is yes, remain standing. If the answer is no, please take a seat. Okay, so obviously prior to this morning, are you aware of PAS 1192 Part 2? So sit down if you weren't aware before today. Okay. Do you have a copy of PAS 1192 Part 2? If you don't, please take a seat. Okay. Have you actually read PAS 1192 Part 2? Okay, this is usually where most people will sit down. Okay, have you adopted or about to adopt PAS 1192 on a project? Okay, and then the last one, are you currently undertaking all the activities within, as I've just described them, on a live project? If the answer is yes, stay standing. Okay, so I think we're probably around 10% of the room, so that's an official statistic now for CITA. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and then just to finish off really, this is sort of you when you're trying to think about, okay, I've been asked to look at this and what it means for my organisation. There's just really a couple of things for you to take away and in terms of consideration from my experience. The first one really is to have a business strategy and a plan. Okay, ideally approved at board level. I know it's easier than it sounds, okay, but I've been that struggling person in the organisation trying to implement something that hasn't got support at that higher level. Get the commercial teams involved early. Okay, you can see the amount of activity that's done before the actual project starts in terms of the pre-contract and the tender responses. Commercial teams don't like surprises. Okay, get them on board, get them educated, and come up with a way in which you're going to respond to these types of tenders. Don't try and do it on every project. Okay, identify suitable projects that you think you might be able to adopt or maybe a little bit less risk. But key to this is finding the right client and or delivery team, depending on which side that you're at. Okay, it is a team sport. Okay, there's no point you or your organisation being the best BIMmer the BIM has ever seen. Okay, you need to get the whole team working. Implement it via a business change program. This is probably where most of my work sort of comes from. All the change management principles apply. Okay, do not run it as a technology project. Run it as a business change and everything that you do typically as a change project. Integrate process and procedures within your quality management system. Certification is a little bit controversial at the moment. However, I can tell you from the BIM task group's perspective, certification on the PAS 1192 will only be under existing ISO 9001 procedures. Okay, these are business processes and therefore exist within a quality management system. If you've got individuals in your organisation who are going to undertake these roles, get it into their personal development plans. Okay, you need to support employees within your organisation to develop the competencies within it. And then, as you'd probably expect from someone who's got an education business, but education, and a bit more education really is where you need to be going. Obviously, there are other education providers available, okay, but giving somebody a copy of the PAS and expecting them to pick it up and start running with it is generally unrealistic. Okay, you need to have a plan to develop the capability within your organisation. Okay, and then based on our survey, the last piece of advice I could probably give you is to just read the bleeding thing. Okay, and with that, I'd say thank you very much.